I should have known something was off the moment I found that weird smirk on Mark's face when I asked him why his phone battery was almost dead. It was like he was hiding a secret, a bad one. You know that gut feeling? The one that screams, run, but you tell yourself, nah, he's just being dramatic? Yeah, I ignored it. Big mistake. Mark was the kind of boyfriend who was charming enough to make you forget red flags. Tall, dark, with a smile that could probably sell ice to Eskimos. And as it turns out, he could sell something a hell of a lot worse. I mean, who would have thought my own boyfriend was moonlighting as a voyeuristic paparazzo? Not me, until last Sunday. Let me back up a bit. We'd been together for just over 6 months. Enough time to feel like things were serious, but not. So long that I was blind to his little quirks. Like how he never wanted me to close the bathroom door fully. He said it was because he liked the open concept vibe. Yeah, right. Who likes open concept bathrooms unless they're hiding something? That Sunday, I was in the shower, singing off key to some throwback song, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. Mark was downstairs, supposedly working. I had the whole apartment to myself, or so I thought. When I stepped out, wrapped in my towel, I noticed his phone lying on the living room couch. Not unusual. Except that it was unlocked. Mark never left his phone unlocked around me. Curious, I picked it up. It lit up with a notification from some website I didn't recognize. The name was a jumble of letters and numbers, like a bad password. Swiped it open, and that's when my stomach dropped. There were dozens, no hundreds, of pictures of me, naked, from the shower, from the bedroom, from God knows where else. Each one tagged with the date, time, and the creepy caption Mark had added, like a deranged auctioneer. I blinked, unsure if I was dreaming or stuck in a bad episode of Black Mirror. Who was buying these? How long had he been doing this? And why? My hands trembled as I scrolled further. Some photos were blurry, others shockingly clear. This wasn't some innocent collection. This was a business. A disgusting, exploitative business. I felt my mind racing. How could someone you trusted turn your life into a goddamn product? And worse, what if someone I knew had already seen these? Knew I had to act? But what could I do? Call the cops? Confront Mark? Delete the photos? It all felt so overwhelming, like a bad dream where you're trapped and no one can hear you scream. Instead, I did what anyone would do when faced with an impossible situation. I sat on my couch, wrapped in my towel, trying to decide whether to cry, scream, or throw something heavy at Mark's collection of vintage comic books. I chose the comic books. After a few deep breaths, I remembered the one thing that kept me sane. Sarcasm. Because if I didn't laugh at this nightmare, I'd probably lose my mind. So here I am, starting this story, telling you all this, while plotting my next move. Because trust me, Mark's little business is about to crash harder than his Tinder dates. After the initial shock wore off, my brain kicked into overdrive. Panic and disbelief gave way to something a little more useful. Cold, ruthless calculation. If Mark thought he could get away with turning my life into some kind of perverted slideshow, he was seriously mistaken. I wasn't about to be the victim in this horror show. First things first. I needed proof. Not just the pictures on his phone, which he could deny, delete, or claim were hacked, but solid, undeniable evidence. Something that would not only expose him, but make sure no one could ever doubt me. I grabbed Mark's phone again, this time more carefully, like I was defusing a bomb. I started screenshotting every image, every tag, every creepy caption. There were timestamps, locations, even usernames of buyers or followers. He had a whole network going on behind my back, and apparently, it was thriving. As I compiled the screenshots, a sick feeling settled in my stomach. How long had this been going on? Months? Weeks? I scrolled back to older photos, and my heart sank further. There were pictures from before we even moved in together. Secret shots he must have taken while I was at work or out with friends. I realized I'd been living with a stranger, not a boyfriend. And those captions. The ones where he tried to sound casual or funny but ended up sounding like a creepy stalker. My shower muse, wet and wild, too hot to handle. He had no idea how pathetic he looked. Or maybe he did, and that made it worse. I knew confronting him head-on wouldn't work. Mark was the kind of guy who'd spin lies so fast. Your head would spin trying to keep up. Plus, he had that smarmy charm that could fool a jury. I needed a better plan. I started by digging deeper. Using some of the usernames, I found the site where the photos were posted. It was some obscure, invite-only forum hidden deep in the internet's darker corners. There were comments, bids, even private messages between Mark and buyers. It was like a twisted auction house. Reading those messages made my blood boil. Strangers discussing my body, rating pictures like a commodity. And Mark? He was there, replying, negotiating prices, boasting about exclusivity. He wasn't just selling photos. He was selling pieces of me, my privacy, my dignity, my trust. But here's where the plot thickens. In one of the messages, a buyer mentioned an upcoming private sale, an event where Mark planned to auction a special collection. That collection was supposedly new, fresh content, which meant more pictures were being taken, right now. I needed to catch him in the act. I waited, played dumb, acted like I had no clue. One night, I pretended to go to bed early, making sure Mark was comfortable on the couch, phone in hand. Then I slipped out quietly and headed to the bathroom, my personal sanctuary that had been violated. I turned off the lights except for a faint nightlight. I stood there listening. Then, through the crack in the door, I saw it. A small, barely noticeable camera lens hidden inside the vent near the ceiling. My stomach twisted. This was beyond disgusting. It was a violation I snapped a picture with. My phone, my hands shaking with a mix of fear and fury. I knew I had to remove it, but not before gathering more evidence. So I went back to my phone, logged into Mark's accounts, and set up a trap. I sent a fake message to one of the buyers pretending to be Mark. The message promised a special set if the buyer came to a private location in town the next night. It was risky, but I had to lure him out. That night, I sat in the shadows outside the agreed spot, a cheap motel near the outskirts. I watched as a black car pulled up, the driver's door opening. Mark stepped out, looking around nervously. Had cameras set up. Every step, every word, every exchange was recorded. He handed over a USB stick to the buyer, who paid him a fat envelope full of cash. Then they parted ways, oblivious to the fact that I was recording everything on my phone. I felt a surge of power. For the first time since discovering the photos, I wasn't helpless. I was in control. But I also knew this was only the beginning. Mark was dangerous, he was cunning, and he wouldn't go down without a fight. Back at home, I laid out the evidence. Screenshots, videos, photos, and messages. I compiled it into a file, ready to send to the police, the media, anyone who could bring him down. Then came the hardest part, the confrontation. I waited until Mark came home. He was tired, unsuspecting. I called him into the living room, holding my phone like a loaded weapon. "Mark," I said, voice steady. "We need to talk." He looked at me, puzzled. "What's going on?" I didn't waste time. I showed him the photos, the messages, the videos. His face changed from smug to terrified. "In seconds, where did you get this?" he stammered. "Doesn't matter," I said coldly. "What matters is that you're done." "I'm done." He tried to plead, to explain, to promise. But I wasn't listening. I told him I was sending everything to the police. I told him I'd expose him to everyone we knew. And then I walked out. But here's the thing. I didn't call the cops. Not yet. Because revenge, my friend, tastes so much sweeter when you're the one serving it. After walking out on Mark like I was done with his disgusting little empire, something unexpected happened. I felt nothing. No relief. No satisfaction. Just this cold, calculating emptiness. It was like waking up from a nightmare only to realize you're still stuck in the damn thing. That's when it hit me. Walking away wouldn't fix this. Mark wouldn't just disappear quietly. He was a predator, and predators don't like losing their prey. They fight back. They get dirty. So I had two choices. Play the victim or become the hunter. Surprise, surprise. I chose to hunt. But how do you outsmart a man who thinks he's the cleverest guy in the room? By being cleverer. By making him think he's still in control while pulling the strings from behind the curtain. I started by watching him closely, like a hawk stalking its prey. Mark was so confident, so sure no one suspected a thing. He never locked his laptop or phone around me. Hell, he bragged about his little side hustle, as if it were some harmless joke. Well, joke's on him. I created a fake online persona, Lola, a collector of rare, exclusive content. I used the usernames and contacts I'd gathered to slip into the very circle where Mark sold his photos. I built a profile full of photos, stories, and messages that would attract him. Enough to bait him. It was like casting a line into a pond, full of hungry fish. And Mark? He bit hard. Almost immediately, I got a message from him. "Hey Lola, got something special just for you." The game had begun. I kept him hooked, stringing him along with promises of new sets, exclusive previews, even secret behind-the-scenes content. The more he shared, the more I collected. Every photo, every message, every detail was saved, encrypted, and backed up. No chance of losing this. Meanwhile, I slipped subtle hints into the fake messages. Phrases that only Mark would understand, inside jokes, references to places only we knew. I wanted him to think he was dealing with someone close, someone he could trust, and he fell for it. One night, I arranged a meetup. The location? An abandoned warehouse by the docks, creepy enough to be plausible, isolated enough for a showdown. I sent the message to Mark. Got the special set ready. Meet me at midnight. Don't be late. He showed up, of course. Nervous, excited, maybe a little cocky. He thought he was closing a big deal, making a big score. What he didn't know was, I had hidden cameras everywhere. I wasn't just recording him. I was watching every twitch, every lie, every moment of desperation. As he waited, I slipped inside, silent as a shadow. I had a backpack full of equipment, speakers, projectors, even a microphone. It was ridiculous, but it worked. When Mark finally started talking to the buyer, me disguised, I played a pre-recorded message of his own voice. I'd captured it earlier, edited it with all the confessions, the bragging, the disgusting details. I blasted it through the speakers. His eyes went wide. Panic. He looked around for the source of the voice, realizing he'd been duped. But before he could run, I stepped out of the shadows. "Surprise, Mark," I said, my voice cold and steady. He froze. "I'm Lola," I added, watching the color drain from his face. The power dynamic flipped instantly. He was no longer the hunter. He was the hunted. He tried to stammer excuses, but I cut him off. "You're done. This ends tonight." I pulled out my phone and started live streaming. The video showed everything. The evidence, his reactions, his terrified face. Viewers flooded in, shocked and horrified by the betrayal. Mark begged, pleaded for privacy, for mercy. But no one was buying it. The chat exploded with rage, disgust, and support for me. I gave him one last warning. "If you ever try this again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you did." Then I walked away, leaving him exposed and powerless. Back at home, I felt a strange mix of triumph and sadness. I'd won the battle, but the war wasn't over. There were still scars, trust shattered, and a long road ahead. But for now, Mark was a lesson, a warning to anyone who thinks they can exploit others without consequences. And me? I was just getting started. The morning after the warehouse showdown, my phone was blowing up like a fireworks display on the 4th of July. Messages, notifications, calls from friends, strangers, even news outlets. Apparently, Mark's little empire had been bigger and uglier than I thought. And my little live stream? Let's just say it went viral in ways I never imagined. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping black coffee, scrolling through the endless flood of responses. There were texts of support, angry rants against Mark, even some messages from people I didn't know who said they'd been victims too. I felt a strange mix of vindication and exhaustion. I'd torn the mask off a monster, but at what cost? Mark was officially radioactive now. His phone was off. His social media accounts vanished. Rumor had it his family was scrambling to distance themselves, and his friends? Well, they were suddenly very busy and unavailable. I imagined them all ducking under their beds, pretending. This wasn't their problem. But here's where it gets juicy. Because Mark didn't go quietly into that good night. No, he had a plan. A desperate, pathetic plan that made me laugh in the darkest, most twisted way. A few days after the exposure, I got a letter. No, not an email. A real physical letter. Hand-delivered by a courier with that I'm nervous but trying to act professional vibe. Inside was a thick envelope stuffed with documents, photos, and a note scribbled in shaky handwriting. It was blackmail. Classic, old school, and so amateur it was almost charming. Mark claimed he had dirt on me. Photos, messages, secrets I didn't even remember sharing. He threatened to leak them to my friends, my family, my workplace. The note was desperate. Drop everything, or I ruin you. I stared at the letter, then burst out laughing. The irony was delicious. The predator, reduced to playing victim. But instead of panicking, I did what I do best. I flipped the script. I contacted a lawyer, a sharp one, with a reputation for tearing people like Mark apart. Together, we traced the sources of his so-called evidence. Turns out, it was all fabricated, manipulated to look real but falling apart under scrutiny. The lawyer sent a cease and desist letter back to Mark, warning him to back off or face serious legal consequences. And I filed a police report for harassment and extortion. But Mark's antics had stirred the pot in more ways than one. Friends I thought I could trust suddenly acted like they didn't know me. Colleagues whispered in hallways. Even my family asked questions, suspicious of the chaos unfolding around me. I realized then that the damage wasn't just about photos or betrayal. It was about trust. Shattered, stained, and painfully hard to rebuild. One night, I sat alone in my living room, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The silence was deafening. The house felt emptier than ever, and that's when I made my final decision. If Mark wanted a war, he was going to get one. But on my terms. I started documenting everything. Every call, every message, every weird encounter. I gathered witnesses, testimonies, and proof. I built a case so airtight that even the most stubborn skeptic would have to believe. But more than that, I crafted a plan to take back control, to reclaim my life, my dignity, and my story. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about survival. And as the days turned into weeks, I felt a fire ignite inside me, a fierce, unrelenting flame that refused to be extinguished. Mark thought he could break me. Instead, he made me unstoppable. The moment I had been building toward finally arrived with the subtlety of a thunderclap. You know that feeling when your phone buzzes and you just know it's going to be the end of something, or the beginning of a mess you didn't see coming. Yeah, that. I sat back in my chair, coffee in hand, staring at the screen. My inbox was full, not with the usual flood of "you go, girl" messages or horrified friends checking in, but with something much juicier, an invitation. From Mark, the fallen king of creep, now reduced to a scared little man begging for a last dance. The invitation was cryptic. Meet me. One last time. Public place. No games. As if he still thought he could negotiate, plead, or manipulate his way out of the mess he'd created. Oh, honey, no. I smiled to myself. This was it. The final act. The curtain call on Mark's sick little show. I wasn't just going to walk into this meeting empty-handed. No way. I came prepared. With layers upon layers of protection, a team of lawyers ready to pounce, a live feed set up for backup, and a voice recorder I'd hidden in my purse. But more than that, I came with the satisfaction of knowing he had nowhere left to run. The day arrived, and I showed up at the cafe where he wanted to meet. The place was packed with people enjoying their overpriced lattes, but all I saw was a stage. Because this wasn't just a meetup. It was my moment to take back every shred of power he ever thought he had. Mark was there, looking exactly how I expected. Pale, sweaty, and a little too eager. He spotted me, gave a weak smile, and stood up, trying to look confident but failing miserably. "Thanks for coming," he said, voice shaky. I raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Here to make a deal?" He hesitated. "Look, I just want to clear the air. Maybe move on." "Move on?" I echoed. "You want me to move on while you sell pictures of me without my consent?" "Cute." He swallowed hard. "I was stupid. It was a mistake." Oh, it was a mistake? You know what? I'm glad you finally admit it. But this isn't about apologies. I pulled out my phone and hit record. The little red light blinked on. His face went white. Are you seriously recording me? He hissed. Oh, sweetheart, I said with a smile. You're on a very public stage now. Then I dropped the bombshell. I have everything. Every photo you took, every message you sent, every damn transaction you made selling my private moments. And I've shared it all with the authorities and the press. Your empire is finished. He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. And if you think you can come crawling back with threats or blackmail, think again. I've got backup, and I'm ready to destroy you. The cafe patrons nearby began to notice the tense exchange. Some pulled out their phones, recording too. Mark's bravado crumbled like a sandcastle under a tsunami. I felt the thrill of victory course through me, but I wasn't done. No more hiding. No more lies. You took what wasn't yours. Now it's time to pay. As I stood up to leave, I saw Mark's shoulders slump, defeated. The man who once thought he had all the power was now reduced to a whisper in the chaos he created. Walking away, I realized this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my story, my body, my voice, my life. And if Mark ever thought he'd control me again, well, let's just say he clearly underestimated the woman he chose to mess with.